Sophia had always thought of her life with Edward as stable, predictable, and safe. After 30 years of marriage, they had built a life filled with shared traditions and memories. A quaint house in the suburbs, holiday gatherings with their grown children, and evenings spent in quiet companionship. She never imagined the foundation of their marriage concealed cracks that had been widening, unseen, for years. It was a forgotten receipt that set everything in motion. Sophia was tidying Edward's study, a space she rarely entered, when she noticed a folded slip of paper sticking out from between two books. She picked it up absent-mindedly, expecting something innocuous, a receipt for office supplies or perhaps a car service. Instead, it was from a nightclub called Velvet Eclipse, dated 2 weeks ago. The amount was far too extravagant for just drinks. Her chest tightened. Curiosity turned to suspicion, and suspicion led her to confront Edward that evening. He dismissed it with an effortless laugh, blaming a coworker's celebratory outing. Yet something in his demeanor, too casual, too dismissive, left her unconvinced. Sophia's doubts festered, compelling her to dig deeper. Over the next few weeks, she scrutinized Edward's behavior. He had grown increasingly distant, spending more evenings working late or attending business dinners. It wasn't long before Sophia found herself parked outside Velvet Eclipse, her heart pounding as she decided whether to step inside. The club was a swirl of flashing lights and pulsing music. Sophia felt out of place amidst the throngs of glamorous patrons. Her gaze swept the room, and then she saw him. Edward sat at a secluded table near the stage, his body language intimate and unguarded. Across from him was a woman half his age, with striking features and an undeniable air of allure. She was a dancer. Her sequined dress shimmered under the dim lights, and her laughter rang like a bell above the din. Sophia's world tilted. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Rage and heartbreak warred within her as she watched Edward lean closer to the woman, brushing her cheek with his fingers. The days that followed were a blur of sorrow and disbelief. Sophia couldn't confront him, not yet. She needed more. She began trailing him, uncovering a web of deceit that stretched back years. The dancer, whose name was Lara, had been part of Edward's life for nearly a decade. There were hidden bank accounts, expensive gifts, and a life Edward had compartmentalized so perfectly that it had remained invisible for so long. Sophia's hurt hardened into resolve. She hired a private investigator to gather evidence. It wasn't about vengeance, she told herself, but clarity. She needed to see the full scope of Edward's betrayal. When the investigator handed her a manila envelope filled with photographs and documents, the reality became inescapable. Edward's double life was laid bare. On a quiet Saturday evening, she placed the envelope on the kitchen table, waiting for Edward to come home. When he arrived, she didn't speak immediately, letting the weight of the silence fill the room. Edward froze when he saw the envelope, his face draining of color. "You owe me the truth," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the storm within her. Edward faltered, then confessed in fragments, excuses and apologies tumbling out, each one a feeble attempt to justify his betrayal. But Sophia had heard enough. For years, she had been his anchor, his partner, and his solace. Yet, he had turned to someone else, erasing the decades they had shared. In the end, Sophia walked away, leaving Edward to face the wreckage of his choices alone. For the first time in her life, she chose herself. The betrayal, though devastating, became a catalyst for her freedom. She stepped into an uncertain future, her heart heavy but unshackled, determined to reclaim the years she still had left. In the months that followed, Sophia's life became a journey of reinvention. She moved out of the home she and Edward had shared for decades, renting a modest apartment in the city. The change in scenery was jarring but liberating. No longer surrounded by memories of her fractured marriage, she began to rediscover who she was outside the identity of Edward's wife. One day, while sorting through a box of old photographs, Sophia found an image of herself from her 20s. She was laughing, her eyes bright with unfiltered joy. The woman in the picture felt like a stranger, yet she yearned to reconnect with her. It became a turning point. Sophia resolved not to let Edward's betrayal define her. She joined an art class, something she had always wanted to do but never pursued, and found solace in the strokes of a paintbrush. Each canvas became a small victory, a step away from the shadows of her past. Meanwhile, Edward spiraled. Without Sophia's steady presence, his life unraveled in ways he hadn't anticipated. Lara, the dancer, proved to be less invested in a future with him than he had imagined. The glamour of their affair dimmed when confronted with the reality of his crumbling finances and tarnished reputation. Edward tried reaching out to Sophia, first with apologies, then with pleas, but she didn't respond. For her, those doors were closed. One evening, while Sophia was at a cafe after her art class, she ran into an old friend from her college days, Mark. He was a widower with a quiet demeanor and a warm smile. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on shared memories and the lives they had built since last seeing each other. Mark invited her to a gallery opening he was attending, and Sophia hesitated for only a moment before agreeing. At the gallery, surrounded by the hum of conversation and vibrant art, Sophia felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Mark's presence was comforting but not overbearing. He encouraged her to speak about her art, to embrace her newfound independence. It wasn't a romance, at least not yet, but it was a reminder that life offered second chances in many forms. Despite the progress she made, Sophia knew there were still wounds to heal. Therapy became an outlet where she could unpack years of suppressed emotions. She faced her resentment, her anger, and even her guilt. Guilt for not seeing Edward's betrayal sooner, for allowing herself to become so entwined with his life that she lost sight of her own. One day, Sophia received a letter from Edward. It wasn't another plea for forgiveness, but an acknowledgement of his failures. He admitted he had taken her for granted, chasing fleeting pleasures while disregarding the depth of what they had built together. He wished her well but didn't ask for reconciliation. For the first time, his words carried a weight of sincerity, and though it didn't erase the pain, it brought her a sense of closure. Sophia burned the letter in her apartment's tiny fireplace, watching the flames consume the remnants of a chapter she had finally left behind. The ashes were a symbol of the past, scattered and inconsequential. Now, Sophia wakes each morning with a sense of purpose. She paints, she laughs, she builds new relationships. Her story isn't about the betrayal anymore. It's about survival and transformation. What Edward broke, she rebuilt. Not as a replica of what was, but as something entirely her own. As the years unfolded, Sophia's transformation continued to bloom. Her artwork, once a private escape, began to gain recognition. A local gallery showcased her pieces in a small exhibit, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. For Sophia, it wasn't about fame. It was about sharing a piece of herself with the world. Each painting was a testament to her journey. The pain, the resilience, the rediscovery of joy. Through her new circle of friends, she met people who saw her not as Edward's ex-wife or a victim of betrayal, but as an artist, a thinker, and a woman with an extraordinary story. Mark became a steady presence in her life. Their connection deepened, but it remained grounded in mutual respect and patience. There was no rush to define their relationship. For Sophia, it was enough to have someone who understood her silences as much as her laughter. One day, while strolling through a bustling street fair with Mark, Sophia spotted a booth selling antique jewelry. Among the trinkets was a delicate gold pendant engraved with the words Carpe Diem. It seemed almost faded, a reminder of the life she had vowed to embrace. She bought it, not as a decoration, but as a personal emblem of her journey. Edward, meanwhile, faded from her life. Occasionally, she heard snippets about him through mutual acquaintances. He had retired early, sold their old house, and moved to a quieter town. The last Sophia heard, he was living alone, his relationship with Lara having dissolved not long after Sophia had left. There was a pang of pity for him, but it was fleeting. She had learned that carrying someone else's burdens was no longer her responsibility. One evening, as she prepared for her first solo art exhibition, Sophia stood in front of her favorite painting. It depicted a phoenix rising from flames, its wings wide and vibrant with color. The piece had been her first attempt at abstraction, and it captured everything she had felt during her darkest moments. Now, as she looked at it, she realized how far she had come. At the exhibition, guests mingled, sipping wine and admiring her work. Mark stood by her side, offering quiet encouragement. A woman approached Sophia, her expression earnest. "Your art speaks to something I can't quite put into words," she said. It's about starting over." Sophia smiled, her heart full. "That's exactly what it's about," she replied. As the evening wore on, Sophia realized the truth she had been inching toward for years. Her life was hers again, fully and unapologetically. The pain Edward had caused was part of her story, but it wasn't the end of it. She had built something new, something beautiful from the ashes. The night ended with laughter, music, and the promise of a bright future. Sophia left the gallery, her hand brushing against the Carpe Diem pendant resting near her heart. She didn't need certainty about what lay ahead. For the first time in decades, she was living in the moment, unafraid and unstoppable. Months after her solo exhibition, Sophia found herself on a train bound for Paris, a city she had always dreamed of visiting but never dared to prioritize during her marriage. The opportunity had come unexpectedly. Her work had caught the attention of a European curator who invited her to showcase her paintings in a collective exhibit celebrating resilience and transformation. The theme felt tailor-made for her journey, and Sophia couldn't refuse. The city greeted her with open arms. She wandered the cobblestone streets, losing herself in its charm. Every corner seemed to hum with inspiration. Paris wasn't just a backdrop. It was a catalyst, igniting a creative spark within her. She spent hours in cafes sketching passers-by, visiting museums, and soaking in the vibrant art scene. One evening, at the exhibit's opening, Sophia stood amidst a crowd of international artists and admirers. Her work hung prominently on one wall, a small plaque beneath each piece describing the emotions that had shaped them. Guests lingered by her Phoenix painting, its fiery colors drawing them in. "Madam, this piece, it's remarkable," said an older man with a thick French accent. "It is as if the bird is alive, bursting free from the canvas." Sophia thanked him, her confidence blooming in the glow of appreciation. For years, she had doubted her worth, silencing her desires in favor of Edward's ambitions. Now, here she was, standing in a foreign country, her art celebrated by strangers who saw her as an individual, not an appendage. The exhibit's success opened doors Sophia hadn't imagined. Invitations to other showcases began arriving, and her name circulated in artistic circles. Yet amid her rising prominence, she remained grounded, savoring the simple pleasures of her new life. One evening, as she sipped wine on a terrace overlooking the Seine, her phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from her daughter, Emily. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. I've been following your work online, and I've never seen you so happy. Let's talk soon. I want to hear all about Paris." The message brought tears to Sophia's eyes. Rebuilding her relationship with her children had been another facet of her transformation. At first, they had been confused and hurt by the divorce, struggling to reconcile their parents' separation with the image of stability they had grown up with. But as they saw Sophia thrive, they began to understand her decision. Sophia responded with a picture of the Eiffel Tower at dusk and a heartfelt message. "I can't wait to share everything with you. Love you more than words can say." By the time she returned home, Sophia was a changed woman, not because Paris had transformed her, but because she had allowed herself to embrace her own potential. She stood on the balcony of her apartment, gazing at the city lights, and reflected on the path she had taken. Edward's betrayal had been the fracture that broke her world apart, but it had also been the rupture that let the light in. Now, she was no longer defined by the cracks. She was the sum of the pieces she had put back together, stronger, brighter, and whole. And for Sophia, the most beautiful chapter was still unwritten. Years passed, and Sophia's life settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and serene. Her art career flourished, her exhibitions traveling from city to city, gaining acclaim for their emotional depth. Yet, Despite her growing success, she never let it overshadow the simple joys of life. A quiet morning with coffee and a blank canvas, heartfelt conversations with her children, and the companionship of Mark, who would become her steady partner in this new chapter. One spring evening, as Sophia prepared for a retrospective of her work in New York, she received an unexpected phone call. The voice on the other end was hesitant, almost unrecognizable. It was Edward. "Hi, Sophia," he began. I've been thinking about calling you for a long time." Sophia felt a pang of surprise, but not the flood of emotions she might have once expected. "What do you need, Edward?" she asked, her tone calm but firm. I wanted to say I'm sorry, not just for what I did to you, but for how I treated you all those years. I don't know if it matters now, but you didn't deserve any of it." Sophia paused, letting his words settle. They felt genuine, but they no longer had power over her. "Thank you for saying that," she replied. "I hope you found peace." There was a silence on the line, as if Edward had been bracing for something else, perhaps anger or bitterness. Instead, he was met with the quiet strength of a woman who had long since moved on. "I'm glad you're doing well," he said finally, his voice soft with resignation. After the call, Sophia sat on her balcony, watching the sunset streak the sky with orange and purple. She thought about how far she had come since the day she discovered Edward's betrayal. His apology, though late, felt like the final stone lifted from her chest. It wasn't forgiveness that she felt, but acceptance. Edward's actions had shaped a part of her journey, but they no longer defined it. The retrospective in New York was a triumph. Guests marveled at the evolution of her work, from the raw, fiery intensity of her early pieces to the serene, luminous quality of her latest collection. A journalist interviewing her for an art magazine asked, "What drives your creativity now?" Sophia smiled, her eyes sparkling. "Life itself," she said. "The way it breaks us and heals us. The way we find beauty even in the cracks." The response resonated deeply with those who had followed her career. She became known not just as an artist but as a storyteller, her paintings weaving narratives of hope and transformation. One evening, back in her apartment, Mark surprised her with a small gift, a journal bound in soft leather. Inside, the first page bore a simple inscription: "Asterisk for all the stories you've yet to tell." Asterisk. Sophia ran her fingers over the words, her heart swelling with gratitude. She kissed him gently and said, "Thank you for everything." She began writing in the journal that night, not just about her past but about the dreams she still harbored. A trip to Japan to study its minimalist art traditions. A desire to open a community studio for aspiring artists who needed encouragement, just as she once had. She wrote of her love for her children and her hope to see them continue to thrive. And most importantly, she wrote of the woman she had become. A woman unafraid to live boldly and love deeply. As she closed the journal, Sophia gazed at the Carpe Diem pendant on her nightstand. It had become more than a symbol. It was a reminder that every moment held the promise of renewal. Sophia's life was no longer defined by the pain of her past. It was defined by the courage to start anew, to embrace the unknown, and to find joy in every stroke of the brush, every shared laugh, and every sunrise that marked another day of her beautifully unwritten story. As Sophia's life continued to unfold, she discovered that her journey was far from reaching its final act. Her desire to give back to the world grew stronger. She began hosting workshops in her hometown, teaching art as a form of healing. The studio she rented was modest but bright, filled with sunlight streaming through tall windows. It became a sanctuary, not just for her, but for those who walked through its doors seeking solace and expression. Her students came from all walks of life: a widowed retiree looking to fill her days with color, a teenager struggling to cope with anxiety, and even a young couple navigating the aftermath of their own marital struggles. Sophia saw pieces of herself in all of them, and she poured her heart into guiding their hands across blank canvases, encouraging them to transform their pain into beauty. One day, a woman appeared at the studio, her demeanor nervous yet determined. Sophia recognized her immediately: Lara, Edward's former lover. For a moment, An awkward tension filled the air, but Sophia's instincts quickly took over. "Welcome," Sophia said warmly, gesturing for Lara to take a seat. Lara hesitated, then spoke softly. "I wasn't sure if I should come. I've been following your work for years now, and I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." Sophia studied her, noting the lines of regret etched into Lara's face. There was no malice in her voice, only a deep yearning for understanding. "The past is the past," Sophia replied. "What matters now is what we do with the present." Lara nodded, her eyes brimming with gratitude. She joined the workshop that day and became one of Sophia's most dedicated students. Over time, a tentative friendship formed between the two women, built on mutual respect and the shared recognition of how life can take unexpected, painful turns. Meanwhile, Sophia's personal life continued to blossom. Mark encouraged her to take her dream of opening a community studio a step further, and together, they found a larger space in the city. With the help of grants and donations, Sophia transformed the building into a vibrant art center that welcomed anyone seeking creativity as a means of healing. She named it Phoenix Arts, a tribute to the symbol that had carried her through her darkest days. The grand opening of Phoenix Arts was a celebration of resilience. Sophia's children attended, bringing their families, and her grandchildren marveled at the colorful murals on the walls. Mark stood by her side, his steady presence a source of unwavering support. Even Edward sent a bouquet of flowers with a note that simply read, "Congratulations, Sophia, you've built something extraordinary." Standing in the middle of the bustling room, surrounded by laughter and creativity, Sophia felt a profound sense of peace. Her life had come full circle, not in the way she had once imagined, but in a way that was richer, more meaningful. That evening, as she locked up the studio, Sophia paused to take it all in. She thought of the years she had spent in the shadows of someone else's life and the moment she decided to step into her own light. Every choice she had made since then had led her here, to a life filled with purpose, love, and an unyielding belief in the power of transformation. Sophia whispered to the quiet room, "This is just the beginning." And she knew it to be true. With a heart full of hope and hands ready to create, she walked into the night, embracing the endless possibilities of tomorrow. Years later, Sophia's name had become synonymous with art that healed. Phoenix Arts was no longer just a local hub. It had grown into a movement. Branches opened in other cities, each one fostering creativity and resilience in those who sought solace through expression. Sophia, now in her 60s, traveled to speak at conferences, sharing her story and inspiring countless others to reclaim their lives after hardship. One crisp autumn evening, she returned to her original studio for a quiet moment of reflection. The room was empty, save for the faint scent of paint and the echoes of laughter and conversations that had filled the space over the years. Sophia sat at an easel, her hands instinctively picking up a brush. She hadn't painted for herself in months, and the urge to create was suddenly overwhelming. The strokes came quickly, without thought, guided by emotion alone. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the canvas revealed a figure standing on a cliff, arms outstretched toward a golden sunrise. It was raw, unpolished, and deeply personal, a reminder of where she had been and where she was now. As she studied the painting, the door creaked open behind her. Mark stepped in, carrying a thermos of hot tea. His hair was streaked with silver now, but his smile remained as warm as ever. "I thought you might need this," he said, placing the thermos on the table beside her. Sophia smiled. "You always know what I need." Mark leaned over to look at the painting. "It's beautiful. Like you." She laughed softly, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I wasn't sure if I still had it in me." "Are you kidding? You've got more than ever," he replied. "It's who you are." Their conversation was interrupted by the faint buzz of Sophia's phone. It was a video message from Emily, her eldest daughter. She opened it, and her screen filled with the faces of her grandchildren, holding up handmade signs that read, "We love you, Grandma. Congratulations on everything." Tears welled in her eyes as she replied with a quick message back, her voice trembling with emotion. "I love you all so much. You're my greatest masterpieces." Later that night, Sophia and Mark walked hand in hand through the quiet streets of the city. She told him about her next idea, a program to bring art workshops to underserved communities. Mark listened intently, as he always did, and encouraged her to pursue it. "You've built so much already," he said, "but I think you're just getting started." Sophia laughed, her spirit light. "I've realized something, Mark. Life isn't about endings or even beginnings. It's about what you do with the space in between." As they turned a corner, the city lights danced in the distance, and Sophia felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her life, once shattered by betrayal, had become a testament to the power of resilience, reinvention, and love. Every step she had taken, every choice she had made, had brought her to this moment. A life full of meaning, surrounded by the people and the passion that mattered most. And as she walked into the future, Sophia knew her story wasn't just her own. It was a reminder to anyone who felt broken that they, too, could rise. Always, in the twilight of her life, Sophia stood in the gallery of Phoenix Arts, now a global symbol of hope and transformation. The evening sun poured through the tall windows, casting golden light across the walls adorned with art from creators of every age and background. The gallery was hosting its most significant event yet, a retrospective celebrating Sophia's legacy, titled From Ashes to Light. Guests filled the room, their conversations a gentle hum. Artists she had mentored over the years came to pay tribute, some bringing pieces of their own to share stories of how Sophia's guidance had shaped their paths. Her children were there, too, Emily, Nathan, and their families, proud and beaming as they moved through the exhibit. Sophia, dressed in a flowing white dress, stood at the center of the gallery. She felt a mixture of pride and humility as she listened to the opening speech given by a young artist who had once been one of her first students. "She taught me that art isn't just about beauty, it's about truth," the artist said, her voice resonating with emotion. "Sophia helped me, and so many others, find the courage to face our pain and turn it into something extraordinary. She didn't just create art, she created hope." When the applause died down, Sophia stepped forward to address the crowd. She held no notes, speaking directly from her heart. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady but warm. "This journey has been one I could never have imagined. If you had told me years ago that the hardest moment of my life would lead me here, I wouldn't have believed you. But I've learned that even in the darkest times, there is light, if you're willing to look for it." She paused, her eyes scanning the room. "Every piece of art here, whether created by me or by someone I've been privileged to teach, is a testament to the power of resilience. We all face moments that break us, but what matters is what we choose to do afterward. Will we stay shattered, or will we rebuild?" The room was silent, her words sinking in. "I rebuilt, and through that process I found myself. I found love, purpose, and community. And tonight, I see all of that reflected in each of you. Thank you for being a part of this journey. My story is yours now. Keep telling it. Keep creating." The crowd erupted in applause, and Sophia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. It wasn't the noise that moved her. It was the collective energy, the shared understanding that they were all connected by something greater than themselves. That night, as the celebration wound down, Sophia wandered through the gallery alone. She stopped in front of her Phoenix painting, the one she had created in the early days of her new life. Its fiery hues glowed softly in the dim light. She reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of the frame, and smiled. Mark appeared behind her, his footsteps gentle. "Admiring your masterpiece?" he asked. Sophia turned to him, her face radiant. "It's not just mine anymore," she said. "It belongs to everyone who believes they can rise again." Mark took her hand, his grip steady and reassuring. Together, they walked out into the cool night air. The city sparkled around them, alive with possibilities. As they strolled, Sophia looked up at the stars, feeling a deep sense of completion. Her life had come full circle, not bound by the pain of the past but elevated by the choices she had made to create something meaningful. The future stretched ahead, infinite and filled with light. And as she walked hand in hand with the man who had supported her, surrounded by a world she had helped shape, Sophia knew one unshakable truth. She had risen from the ashes and soared higher than she ever dreamed possible. Her story was complete, but her legacy would live on forever.